I started my investigation into the paternity of my boss, Mr. Kilema Anthony, based on the informations that he provided, along with the consent of his current father, Chief Anthony, the old man at the hospital. As a trained investigative journalist, I know that the best place to start from will be the hospital where he was born. As such, I got the detailed address and set off for Fomoti, a state known as the food basket of the nation. Fomoti is the place where Chief Anthony and his now deceased wife raised their family. However, the place where they gave birth to their first child, my boss, was one of the suburbs of Fomoti called Anoga. The journey to Fomoti was quite challenging because of the potholes that littered the way. In a conversation with a passenger who plied the road frequently, I got to know that most of the potholes were dug by local and mercenary bandits who lurk in the dense forest and come out to rob the passengers once the law enforcement agents are not visible. After about 8 hours from takeoff, we arrived at Fomoti towards the evening. I was quite famished when we arrived there. As soon as I got down from the bus, I went to eat at one of the food canteens. Shortly after, I boarded another bus from Fomoti to Anoga, reaching the bus station close to midnight. The bus station at Anoga was buzzing with activities, with passengers arriving and others boarding the night buses going to new destinations. Street vendors and bars lined the area, serving crowds even at such a late hour. The place felt ancient, wild, and somehow intimidating compared to where I come from. At a point, I went back to the bus that brought me and asked the driver of the bus if I could sleep in the bus until morning, but he bluntly refused. He suggested that I should walk down the road and rent a room in a nearby motel. Later, sensing that I might be targeted by local criminals, who always ply the environment, looking for strangers, he reluctantly agreed to allow me to stay with him in the bus. Much later he came up with a better idea, and asked me to follow him home. That was around 1 a.m., after the station had quieted down. We left for his house, and on the way, we passed a group of vigilantes patrolling the area. They greeted the driver because they recognized him, and I greeted them as well, avoiding any suspicion. When we reached his house, a simple, unplastered building with multiple rooms, he loudly called for one of his wives to prepare the guest room for me. She came out to greet us and quickly complied, offering me food along, but I politely declined. The next morning, I headed to the private hospital where the birth certificate stated my boss was born. There, I met a middle-aged man, Dr. Akilo Fred, whom I later discovered to be the chief medical director, and I informed him of my mission. He explained that he purchased the hospital after the original owner had passed away and did some refurbishments. Afterwards, he called one of his staff and instructed her to grant me full access to the old records of the hospital. What I discovered there left me stunned. The files that was brought to me were dual in nature. In a file that was obtained in the former owner's office cabinet, it was written there that Chief Anthony's late wife, Philomena, actually gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl, but both had died from postnatal complications. I sensed that the reason why Chief Anthony was unaware of this truth was because he was on a business trip when the wife unexpectedly went into labor before the expected delivery date. According to the former chief medical officer's records, the woman fainted when informed of the tragedy and had to be revived much later. All this happened before Chief Anthony arrived at the hospital. He mentioned in his notes that an arrangement between him and Philomena, Chief Anthony's wife, was quickly made on a humanitarian level, for a fee. It was unclear what this meant, as at the time we went through the file. The new owner, Dr. Akilo Fred, was equally shocked by these discrepancies. He confided in me that he had encountered other irregularities in the hospital's history and offered me full access to continue my investigation. I discovered as I continued to check the records that another woman had given birth to twins on the same day. This was only visible in the former medical director's record only. It was not recorded in the hospital records. I obtained the contact address of the second woman that gave birth to twins and went to pay her a visit. It was the husband, an old man that I met, and he informed me that his wife had passed away many years ago. He also said that they have only one daughter, contrary to the hospital's former owner's records, which indicated the birth of 2 children. What then happened to one of the children? I thought to myself. I almost asked the old man, but I just decided to caution myself. A breakthrough finally came when I started looking into the nurses who were on duty the day my boss, Mr. Kilema Anthony, was born. It was recorded that Nurse Titles was on duty, but she was forcefully retired at a point based on some unethical allegations leveled against her. I got her contact address too and went to her place in order to interview her. She was quite elderly when I met her, and she also looked and spoke in a very religious manner. It took a while before she spoke, but when she commenced, she tearfully admitted that she had colluded with the late doctor to do many evil and that she was forcefully retired when she got tired of many ungodly things they did and stopped complying. She confessed that the male twin from the second birth of twins had been given to the late wife of Chief Anthony, Philomena, while the female twin was handed over to the real biological mother of the twins, misleading her into believing that one of her twins had died. Another baby that died at the hospital was shown to her as a proof. This meant that my boss's real father was the old man that I had met at Anoga. However, a paternity test would be needed to confirm this. I shared my findings with Dr. Akilo Freight, and then returned home the same day to attend to a family emergency. I know that I will still need to come back and find out where the female child that doubled up as my boss' twin sister is. The following day, I went to the hospital and shared my findings with the old man, and incidentally my boss was visiting him. My boss, Mr. Kilema Anthony, and Chief Anthony then mutually agreed that I should return to Anoga the following week with my boss, in order for him to carry out a paternity test and confirm if the old man is his biological father or not. When I mentioned the location to my boss and Chief Anthony, they both had a funny look on their faces. I didn't press further. The following week, we traveled, and during the trip, my boss just kept muttering in disbelief, "It can't be," as if he was trying to process the unimaginable thoughts in his head. As we approached the old man's house, my boss had a surprised and sorrowful look on his face. When we eventually arrived at the old man's house, my boss was bewildered. We met him sitting down, and the moment the old man raised his head and warmly greeted my boss, ABD asked about his wife, my boss fainted. We were all confused initially, but it was at the hospital, after regaining consciousness, that my boss, Mr. Kilema Anthony, revealed tearfully, pointing to the old man, who was as confused as I was, and said to me, "He's my father-in-law." I was shocked to my bone marrow after I realized the gravity of what has happened. I had to step in and explain everything to the old man in private with the medical doctor, Dr. Akilo Freight, in attendance. The truth was also very hard for him to grasp, but he remained composed and only continued to shake his head. It dawned on us all that my boss and his wife were twins, but separated at birth, and his father-in-law is in the real sense, his biological father. He has been involved in incest unknowingly for many decades. This revelation was very overwhelming for us all, especially since my boss was already a grandfather. His first son and second daughter had children of their own. How would they ever explain to their children that their parents were twins? After a day of recovery, we all agreed to keep the matter between us. However, I insisted that I must inform Chief Anthony, who began the investigation in the first place. My boss also suggests that his father-in-law, now his biological father, should also accompany us on the journey as we go back to meet Chief Anthony. We had a very quiet journey back, and when we all visited Chief Anthony at the hospital, there was another round of emotional exchanges over the matter. The matter, however, got more messy when unannounced, my boss's wife, who by our discovery, we now know to be his twin sister, came to visit Chief Anthony at the hospital. She was absolutely surprised to see her father all the way from Anoga there. Despite the fact that we all put up a manly appearance and quickly changed the topic, she knew something was amiss. A moment of silence among us, escalated the matter as my boss, Mr. Kilema Anthony, Chief Anthony, and the father of my boss's wife, suddenly bursted into tears. She was really scared, seeing grown men cry like babies. Her initial thoughts was on whether something bad has happened to the children. I had to quickly step in, took her just outside the private ward where I took time to explain everything to her in details. As expected, she thought I was mad, got up and went back to the room, and I followed her. There, we saw my boss, Chief Anthony, and the father of my boss's wife with their head hanging down sorrowfully. She asked her husband, who we just discovered to be her twin brother, if it's true, and the moment he nodded, she too collapsed and had to be rushed to the emergency unit of the hospital. Our initial conclusion was that she must never learn that her husband was her twin brother, but things changed the moment she showed up unexpectedly. The only person that we would have loved to heap the blames on was Philomena, but unfortunately she is late. On a second thought, my boss's wife said that the suggested paternity test should be carried out, and the results showed that Mr. Kilema Anthony and his wife showed 99.9% possibilities in resemblance to their biological father, the old man from the village. It was at this time that I got to know that his name is Mr. Ofio Augusto, a retired soldier. Chief Anthony looked at my boss and his biological father and assured everyone that the discovery will never deter the love he has for him. He only wants to know the truth, considering the fact that he may soon die. Three of them laughed and cried at intervals as they passed many comments over the matter, citing many similar examples and wondering why such character traits are observed in human beings. Much later, my boss and his biological father came to visit his twin sister, who is also his wife, at the ward where she was recuperating. After spending some time there with them, I decided to check Chief Anthony before going home, and he congratulated me for a job well done and promised to release some funds into my account the following day. He then recommended that I should go ahead with the verification of the details of his other two children's paternity, and my discoveries were more astonishing.